Russia is suffering one of the most stunning defeats in history against the legendary defense of the Ukrainian army. The mass surrender of Putin's soldiers is changing the fate of the war. But what is the reason for the surrender of Russian soldiers to Ukrainian soldiers, who are believed to be weaker than them despite being outnumbered? The number one reason is, of course, the exemplary defense of the Ukrainian army in many areas. With a historic resistance, the Ukrainian army managed to foil all of Russia's plans. But can the success of an army force its enemies to surrender? This question is very important. Let us go to the battlefield to answer it. Russia currently occupies 3 regions in Ukraine: Luhansk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia. Kherson, the largest regional capital occupied by Russia, was liberated by the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army managed to push Russia to the eastern side of the Dnipro River. Of course, this was not easy. The Ukrainian army managed to gain the upper hand in this war by making very important strategic moves. In total, more than 90,000 Russian soldiers have been killed so far. The first reason that pushed the Russian soldiers to surrender was this feeling of great defeat. Russian soldiers are now fully convinced that they cannot win this war against Ukraine. The Ukrainian army has managed to gain the psychological upper hand. So many soldiers have died in the Russian army that all the soldiers who are fighting now think that they will be killed if there is a conflict. That's why they are trying to escape from the army or surrender immediately. On many fronts, Russian soldiers immediately started waving white flags when they saw the Ukrainian army. Russian soldiers surrendered by raising their hands without any conflict. The Ukrainian army is constantly sharing these images. Ukrainian drones record all the movements of the Russian army. The surrender images of Russian soldiers are also recorded by Ukrainian drones. When these images are shared on social media accounts, they attract great attention. The biggest interest is shown by other Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers share these images with each other and say that they should surrender. In addition, the Ukrainian army shows a very positive approach towards the surrendered Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers who surrendered to the Ukrainian army say that they were treated very well in the videos they shot and called on other Russian soldiers to surrender. In the most popular of these videos, the Russian soldier said, "Here they give us hot food, winter clothes, and a comfortable bed. None of this is in the Russian army." Zelensky took a very important step in this regard and made a call to Russian soldiers to surrender. It is claimed that thousands of soldiers surrendered after the speech of the Ukrainian leader, who addressed Russian soldiers on television. This critical move of Zelensky is considered as one of the events that changed the course of the war. Here is what Zelensky said in this program. "We have been listening to your conversations among yourselves. We know what you think about this senseless war, this shame and your state. On behalf of the Ukrainian people, we offer you a choice. If you surrender to our forces, we will treat you the way people deserve to be treated. The way you are not treated in the army. The way your army does not treat our army. The choice is yours." There are other reasons why Russian soldiers are so eager to surrender. For this, we need to know the structure of the Russian army. The Russian armed forces have 1,014,000 active and 2 million reserve personnel. It is also the second largest power in the world in terms of the number of soldiers. In addition to mercenaries in the Russian army, there are soldiers from many different ethnic elements. The Russian Federation has 22 republics. Minority people living in these regions are also recruited into the army. However, racism is quite high in Russia. Soldiers recruited from minority regions are treated very badly. Russian commanders do not care about the death of minority soldiers. This situation increases tensions in the Russian army. Soldiers who are mistreated by their commanders are much more willing to surrender, because these assimilated people do not want to fight for Russia. At this point, it is necessary to open a very important topic. In Russia, it is not believed that this war contributes to the interests of the country. The majority of Russian citizens do not support this war. Anti-war protests are increasing day by day. "This is Putin's war, not ours," say the Russian rebels. This slogan is also affecting the soldiers in the Russian army. Russian soldiers do not want to die for Putin, because the number of those who think that this war is being fought only for Putin's political career is quite high. The other big problem in the Russian army is mercenaries. The Russian army cooperates with the Wagner Group for the organization of mercenaries. This mercenary company, run by Prigozhin, is identified with many war crimes. It is claimed that the Biden government will recognize the Wagner Group as a terrorist organization. Due to the pressure of Prigozhin, the president of Wagner, on the Russian government, mercenaries have many privileges. There is a great tension between mercenaries and Russian citizens who are compulsory serving in the military. This situation completely disrupts the hierarchical structure in the Russian army. In fact, the hierarchical structure in the Russian army has long been breaking down. Ukrainian troops have killed many generals in Russia. Also, generals who did not want to be part of this war resigned. To replace these generals, many Ukrainian soldiers were promoted. Therefore, the Russian army was led by very inexperienced commanders. This situation led to constant chaos in the Russian army. Due to this chaos, many wrong decisions were made in the Russian army, and a serious vacuum of authority was created. This led to the surrender of more Russian soldiers. The surrender of Russian soldiers has another great advantage for Ukraine. Russia is forced to take back its surrendered soldiers. That's why they need a prisoner exchange. If the Russian army captures Ukrainian soldiers, the Ukrainian government saves its soldiers by making a prisoner exchange. Thus, the surrendered Russian soldiers ensure the liberation of Ukrainian soldiers. Thanks to the great superiority of the Ukrainian army in this war, Russian soldiers continue to surrender day by day. The Russian army does not have enough soldiers left to fight Ukraine. What do you think about the surrender of Russian soldiers? Do you think Zelensky and the Ukrainian army managed to change the course of the war by ensuring the surrender of Russian soldiers? What do you think about the crisis in the Russian army? Share your opinions with us.